Ladies and gentlemen, Tara Oates is a fantastic filmmaker and producer and actress and a lot of things, and we'll let her introduce herself in a moment, but right now we'll go through what's happening with Film Impact Georgia. Molly.
Yeah, so Film Impact Georgia is a 501c3 here that provides grants, education, and opportunities to filmmakers in the state of Georgia. With a diversity pledge, FIG works to break down the socioeconomic barriers of entry into film and television for Georgia residents. Obviously, we're in a very strange time now, and some of our projects that we were working on for this year have had to kind of be postponed, but the things that we do currently have going on, we have a logline contest that has a horror theme that actually launched today for the month of June. So that can be found on our website. You can win $150 or $50 if you're the winner or the runner-up, and all you have to do is write a logline. Very simple. The short film grant that we have for $5,000 is open now. The deadline for that is July 1st. And then we have COVID-19 resources on our website. And obviously, one of our biggest things is our Film Impact Georgia community group on Facebook that hopefully gives people access to a lot of resources during this time.
So great. All righty. So Tara Oates, who are you and what are you doing here?
Well, apparently I'm a pro, so whew, glad to hear that. Hi, I'm Tara Ochs. I am a hyphenate actor, writer, producer, voiceover artist, improv comedian, teacher, and I guess I would say obviously the reason I'm here is primarily because for the last 4 years I've been a partner at Picture It Productions, which is a television development production company here in Atlanta. My title is VP of Development. We basically Googled that title. No, it's kind of weird because titles are a strange thing. It indicates that I do pretty much everything. I support Lance Kroll, who's our head of development, and we do everything from identifying new projects to early stage development of those projects. I am writing everything from log lines to pitch decks to one-pagers. And then also, once we have a project ready to go, we work to package it. So we're identifying partners we've worked with previously as well as new partners, whether they're co-producers, writers, directors, occasionally talent. So I'm sort of coordinating that process. And then when we're receiving scripts and written out pitches to go to market, I'm participating in the creative aspect of, reading that and voicing my feedback and trying to make the product better. So.
Okay. So just so you all know, I've known Tara for umpteen years. And actually, I remember when Tara Oates first moved to Los Angeles, I saw her final show at Dad's Garage.
Oh my gosh.
This was back.
I remember that.
This is back probably in the late 90s, early 2000s. When did you go to LA?
2000. I arrived in LA 2001.
Okay, yeah. So 2000, probably 2001. And my brother and I used to come into Dad's Garage. That was the only thing we did in Atlanta, was the Center for Puppetry Arts and going to Dad's. And we were so sad when Tara left, even though we didn't really know, we were just fans. And we're like, the one girl at Dad's Garage who's also like the funniest person on stage is leaving. We were so sad about it. So thankfully she came back to us. So can you talk a little bit about, I know we're going to get into the Picture It stuff, but talk a little bit about your experience in LA and then you eventually coming back and why those decisions were made, maybe.
Sure. I'll do my best to kind of make it a broad stroke. I was, I went to school for acting at Florida State. And while I was there, I met a group of guys who were doing comedy improv. And this was in the mid 90s. So it was something I'd never heard of or seen before. Whose Line Is It Anyway? It was still a British stage show, I think, at that point. And they were amazing. They were the guys that eventually founded Dad's Garage a year later. And so that was sort of my first foray into spontaneous storytelling. And I think that the reason I bring that up is because that's sort of my experience trajectory that led me where I am now. So I became a comedy improviser. And when I graduated college, I moved up to Atlanta in 97 and started playing with Dad's Garage as much as possible, while also doing scripted shows at Georgia Shakespeare Festival and with a company called Solstice and 7 Stages and a bunch of other theaters in town. So I was kind of living this actor life. And a natural trajectory was to go out to LA. So about 3.5 years later, I moved out to LA and tried my acting career there. The thing that kept sustaining me throughout all of this, and the thing that people were interested in, was my ability to do comedy improv. So especially as a woman in the comedy world, I was a bit of an oddity. So after 8 or 9 years in LA, it was 2009 when I decided to move back to Atlanta. I'd always kept ties to Atlanta, sort of emotional and friendship. I'd come back and perform at Dad's. There was just, Atlanta was a community that I was allowed to do everything in. And in LA, it felt like you couldn't do anything. You couldn't take 2 steps without spending $500, and there was a line out the door. And you know, I would say, I'm working on editing this project, and they'd say, why aren't you focusing on your acting? And I think, well, because everything teaches me everything else. So I always had this sort of broad interest level. When I moved back to Atlanta in 2009, I rejoined Dad's Garage, but I also called up Shadowlight Pictures, which is Richard Sampson's company, and said, hey, do you need somebody to help you there? And I was working on deliverables in his production office. And I called Rod Paul at Primary Pictures and helped him locate footage for a documentary. So I was grabbing sort of hold of all of these different projects and having great success, not having to wait tables. And that building, reconnecting to the whole community, that's where I was when 4 years ago, my old buddy Lance Kroll, who founded Whole World Theater back in the 90s, and that's how I knew him, and a little bit from LA, said, you know, Atlanta sounds great. And that's where I'd like to move my family. Do you think there's anybody there making stuff that might want to make TV shows? And I sent him Nick Gibbons' pilot, and I sent him a whole bunch of names. And I said, why don't you throw a party and I'll bring all the people, and you can see just how much we're doing here. And I of course wasn't the only one who brought people, you know, Michael Sokol brought a bunch of folks. Everybody showed up, because that's what happens in Atlanta, is everybody shows up. And he was blown away. So immediately we started a company, and I insinuated myself into the company by saying, hey, this is all dudes. You know, you could use a lady to listen into these projects. And, you know, I used all of my skill sets, all my production skill sets, to make myself invaluable. And 4 years later, here we are.
That's fantastic.
Is that good?
No, that's perfect. That's exactly what I wanted to know. So that kind of answers how this got started with Lance. I wonder, can you talk a little bit about Picture It and how it may set us apart from how other maybe development companies do, or how some people traditionally think that they get their television show on the air?
Sure. So Picture It is a traditional television development company. We work like, there's probably 400 plus of us that exist in Los Angeles and another 200 in New York. We are non-writing executive producers who identify IP, package it, or do early stage of development to kind of shape it into a show that's marketable, package it with writers, other producers, directors, and then we take it to market. So we have our agent, or in our case now, quite often our studio, schedule appointments to meet with Netflix and Apple, or if it's broadcast, ABC, CBS, NBC, Fox, not CW, that's usually a separate thing. But, and we fly out to LA, and we sit in a room with a couple of executives for half an hour to an hour with a writer that talks most of the time, and we sit there smiling, and all that work that we put in for years hopefully gets bought by a network. So it's a very traditional path. There's no back doors. I'm not calling my friend at Netflix. We're not shooting the entire pilot and then sending the Vimeo link to various networks. We are doing a very traditional verbal pitch that then becomes, if it gets bought, becomes a script that then they read. And then if they like the script, it goes to pilot. Then like the pilot, it goes to series. Very straightforward. But I think the unique thing is we're in Atlanta, and that doesn't usually happen that's not really an entity here. It's starting to change. There's a couple other folks that are opening up shops. We have found over the last 4 years, when we first started, it was very much a spaghetti against the wall. Lance had sold shows before. He'd been in writers' rooms, but the industry had changed even since he'd sold a show. So we didn't really know, other than using Lance's contacts and his knowledge of TV, how exactly we were going to succeed. So we took on a whole lot of projects that made us excited, not because we thought they were desperately needing TV, but because we were in love with them. We thought they were great ideas. We got those all packaged up, or we put those into these great pitch deck formats, and we headed to LA and started showing them around, and that got the attention of an agent. So we're with Paradigm now. That also got us the attention of other producers. It was sort of a typical process. Now, after 4 years, we've sort of shed the unscripted side of things, as well as the short form digital, also known as OTT. We shed unscripted because that seems to work better with in-house production companies. Like Crazy Legs is a great example. They develop an unscripted show, they produce it themselves, they take that pilot and they sell it to networks that they have a relationship with. That's not really our move. We're more of a writer-based scripted development. OTT, we let that go because that market was just getting more and more volatile and the budgets were rock bottom, so it didn't make sense for there to be non-writing producers attached to a short-form digital project. So for example, our friends Javier and Zay, who have an Adult Swim show that they've been producing for Adult Swim. They're not going to need us because that's a very small budget and they should get all of it. So they are a little turnkey operation. So they're a really great example of success in that format. So we are at this point a traditional scripted development company. I think that answers.
No, that's great. So, and just for our audience, we're going to be using a lot of terms here, and there's various skill sets and just knowledge within our audience. So don't feel stupid if you don't understand certain terms. Go ahead and add it in the chat box. And Molly, if you want to interrupt with any sort of terminology questions, feel free to jump in for that. So I thought it'd be fun because I think a lot of people know this, but I actually have been working with you all for some time now, moonlighting on the side and working on some wild stuff. And it was a pretty unique experience because Tara said, hey, you guys are weird. Let's make a show about your life growing up. And I didn't know how to begin with that, quite frankly. We kind of, we've always known that we had a fairly unique upbringing. And to be clear, I feel like Picturette, you guys do kind of focus on personal stories. Is that right?
Yeah, and if we can go into that sort of our headline mandate a little bit later, but yeah, the short answer is one of the things, and it also answers Annie's question. If it's a true story or is a basis in real life, that's always going to be something we're super attracted to.
Yeah.
It makes it a lot easier to sell to networks if you can say this is based on a true story.
Yeah, and it's also, I mean, and we can talk about this too, but it seems like everything that is being developed right now has to have something attached to it that it is based on, even if it's just a headline from a newspaper or a comic book or a podcast or something. There's just that term IP is just thrown around a lot, but that seems to be the nature of the industry right now. It has to have something attached to it.
Right. Yeah. That, you guys, it's been legend at Dad's Garage that John Carr was homeschooled by Christian clowns. And everybody just kind of goes, what? you know, if you're a writer and you walk into a pitch and you go, I've got this idea about these kids that were homeschooled by Christian clowns, and they go, and you see them kind of zone out. But if you start by saying, this is a true story, these kids actually lived this life, every executive is just going to go, what? Just like everybody at Dad's does. So you know instinctively that's an incredible hook. And now I've got them hooked, and I can tell them, well, what's your take on this world? So yeah, we call it living IP. We didn't coin that term. You can use it. But I definitely have taken time in the early stages of this process to very deeply investigate what exactly IP is, because there's a lot of misunderstandings about that. But yeah, it's living IP, man. We're hungry for it.
Which is great. And so I wonder, I thought might be fun just kind of walk through the process that I've been going through, that my brother's been going through, to where we are now. Obviously, we can't talk about all the little bits and pieces, so we apologize in advance for being a little vague book. We're not.
You're all trying to steal our idea.
Yeah. So it's just, we're in relationships with various peoples, and those relationships have responsibilities. So I know it sounded way more prestigious than it needed to.
Shooting a porn.
So what was great is that Tara came to us, and up until that point, we hadn't really thought about it in a linear format. It was just like a thing that happened to us on that level. So when you do receive a story, Tara, like us, are you there to help figure out what the show could be, or do you find that people are already coming in with a package deal? How do you differentiate those things?
We're looking for unique ideas, unique worlds that haven't necessarily been represented. Picture It often says we present ideas that aren't found in the coastal bubbles. So, New York and LA are really craving those stories that are middle America. So we definitely look for that. And, ideas come to us at a lot of stages. Generally speaking, the earlier stages are better for us. Because ultimately what we're trying to do is identify a world that has all of the elements that make a great series. So for example, Raymond and John's world has a family. It also has a school setting. It has a lot of specificity, like there's differences between the characters. They have interesting relationships that are flawed and imperfect, that allow for comedic moments and true moments. Those are all there's a ton of elements that can make a great TV show. Our job is to present those elements so that a writer, an executive level writer, also known as showrunner, is going to look at it and go, there's 1,000 stories there. And I can call these guys up in 3 years and go, hey, what did you do about mowing the lawn? Was that a thing? And then another story pops up and now they've got another episode. So as the showrunner ultimately has what you call the take, they're going to have the take on the show. They're going to say, you know what? I see Raymond and John's show as a family show set in the 90s, a la the Goldbergs. And I want to make sure that there's puppets involved because they were puppeteers, and the puppets are going to be like, are going to actually be sentient. So the showrunner ultimately is the one who comes in with that take. Prior to that, we play around with ideas of takes, but we don't pitch that to our writers. We want to give them the space to come up with that idea. So if the project comes in with a script already written, if it comes in with a pilot already shot, if the creative comes in with an idea that's out of whole cloth and they have a very specific way they want it done, it's not as beneficial to us. We're not really going to be able to do as much with it. Especially if the script may be a good script, but because it's not coming from an executive level writer, it's really hard to even get those read by anybody. And most of the time they end up going out the door. The showrunner is going to get paid to write the show. So the earlier stages are better. Then we have a little bit more room to play and a little less of the person kind of being hung up on, well, it's got to be this way. Mm-hmm. Which is why it was great to work with Raymond and John, because they know their world very deeply. They also have two very different perspectives on the interpretation of their growing up, which is super fun to play with. The unreliable dual narrators kind of a thing. But they have been very creatively open to what our showrunner wants to do with the world.
Yeah, that's really interesting. It's just been fascinating to see different people's perspective on the show, i.e. our lives. And there is a level of detachment, I think, that is required for anybody who is going to get their show moving forward. You know, I think that John and I specifically agreed to that like very early on, where it was just like, okay, this is our life, but it's not really our life. The only mandate we've ever had was the fact that we wanted to respect our parents and to make sure that it wasn't like, they also know fully what we're doing and they sign off on it and they don't give a shit. But we also want to make sure that they're not, we can make fun of everybody, but we want to make sure that it's, you know, done in the right tone. So one of the interesting things is once we kind of had our initial conversation, you all just started asking us about our lives. It was almost just like an interview. Yeah. And from there, we kind of put together a sizzle reel. Can you talk a little bit about what the sizzle reel that you all do and what, we're not going to show one, but describe what it may look like visually?
Yeah, I guess this is as close to proprietary operating practices as it gets for us. Because at the end of the day, we can't duplicate the people involved in the company, but because we're in Atlanta, we don't have the opportunity to meet people in person. And in LA or in New York, what typically happens is you go into in-person meetings with writers and producers and whatnot, and you're able to talk with them in the room about the idea. We don't have that kind of funding. And so we have to we can't fly out every creative that has a great idea. But part of a great idea is the person and the personality that brings it to us. So the way we do this is we get those people on camera and we interview them. So we do what's a combination of a video pitch and a tone reel, where we let them tell their story. We edit it. Lance is a fantastic editor. He was the editor on his own TV show, Free Radio, for like 2 years. So he knows what he's doing when it comes to this stuff. And he edits these things a lot like a movie trailer. They have the great energy to them. And we throw in footage from shows that are adjacent to what we're trying to do so that people get an idea of the tone. The music helps. And they get this simple 5 or 6 minute sizzle video and they've got it. They get the idea. And it's a lot more effective for us than sending a pitch deck or even a 1-page, because people read all day, but watching a video for 5 or 6 minutes is a lot easier. So we've had a lot of success. It also is, and this was true for John and Raymond's project, part of our development process. We videotape a 2-hour interview and then we work weeks and weeks and weeks on editing it, going back and forth with the creatives, asking them, send us more footage, send us more photos, to try and compress this down into a 5 or 6 minute elevator pitch. And during that time, that's when we really start to discover what the key elements are. And maybe we find that one sentence that really kind of socks you in the gut and makes you go, yes, oh, that's so true. You know, and that becomes the little ending tag. So it's not only a marketing tool, but it's also part of our process.
Yeah. I do see a question here from Jose. Hi, Jose.
Jose.
He's asking if Picture It only does comedies.
Nope. We do both comedy and scripted. It's so good to see you. As they have submitted to us before, he has got a lot of great ideas. We'll find one. We will. But yes, comedy, drama, it's all scripted. We don't really mess with unscripted. It's been a bit of a struggle, as I said before. It's kind of a different entity. Cable, streaming, broadcasts, anything linear, we're on it.
Great.
Yep.
So so that was just so everybody knows. And it's also what's great about Picture It is they were very honest with us when we first got into this and kind of talked about what it might look like if we did go forward, thinking, letting us know that our position or involvement in the project. Can you talk a little bit about that as far as like individuals who may not have like a bunch of writing credits or just our people, like their involvement in the show moving forward, if it does move forward?
Absolutely. And I think that I really appreciate getting a little space to talk about this, because I think it's a bit of a learning curve for our community, because we are so experienced in independent film and feature film work, which is a different process than television. So with television right now, there's over 500, well, there were, I don't know what's going on with Corona right now, but there were over 500 original scripted series being produced around the world, across all networks, which is an enormous number. They were calling it the golden age of television. But at the same time, and as the budgets were going into the millions per episode in some cases, that was also attracting all talent. So television used to be sort of second place to film. Now it's not. Now it's a big investment. It requires a large team of experienced people. And at our level, with the networks that we're pitching to, they're not going to bank on less. And since it takes an investment of several years and lots of time and money and whatnot, we're probably not going to pitch to the super low budget, smaller networks. So to that end, when we walk into the room, our package has to be airtight. The showrunner has to be close to, if not executive level, which, by the way, is something that the WGA claims. You work your way up to that. So you can't, unlike film, where if I give you $50,000 for your movie, I can be an executive producer. That's not the case in television. So when we have creatives approach us, we make it very clear that there's expectations that you need to have about being attached to your project. And that is that ultimately what you can ask for in your deal is to be a consulting producer. Beyond that, we have a couple of folks that we're trying to get a spot in the writer's room. That's a very hard thing to accomplish. We haven't achieved it yet, but then again, we haven't had a writer's room start yet. So we're getting close to one. So if you want to be a writer and you have a sample that is a good sample, then you have the potential for us to fight for you to get into the writer's room as well, beyond your consulting producer. But beyond that, because we aren't executive level writers already, it's not something we can ask for as a community. However, Picture It is really, really interested in raising up our community and helping to, we're often asked, well, why can't the writers' rooms be in Atlanta? And it's like, well, because the writers they're hiring aren't in Atlanta. If they are, they can have their writer's room here. It's up to them, but they all live in LA. There's some in New York, with few exceptions. So for us, the goal is to raise up the community, to start to get people more access to television in one way or another, by sort of giving them the opportunity to watch the process, participate in the process to the best of their ability. But when it comes to things like credits, it's not something that we have any control over. The WGA identifies those credits. The studio makes a deal with you and tells you what credit you're going to get. As far as getting in the writing room, you got to have a really strong sample. and that's the network and the showrunner's decision. But what it can do is start to give you connections and experience and exposure, and hopefully a nice per episode check. It's not a lot of money, by the way. It's a very small amount of money. So our job is to get people, that's why we take Living IP. We want people to stay attached to the project as much as possible and to benefit from it. But ultimately, the reality is with a television career, you really have to start from the ground up. You can't buy your way in. You can't pay for a pilot and then sell it off and be a star in the traditional sense. There are a couple of places where that's happened, I guess, backdoor sort of deals, but that's not us. So yeah, so that's the kind of conversation we have to have with every creative when they walk in, is what does this relationship actually look like? What can I benefit from this? Because the idea of selling a TV show is not actually, doesn't actually look like what we imagine sometimes. Hi, Brohammer.
Yeah. That's really important to know. So in our process, the thing that we've been working on, we kind of developed this thing. We had a sizzle, which is really funny and hilarious. And it was a great and interesting process because, like you said, that we were able to figure out what the hell the show might be without actually, we really hit that sweet spot of like giving people a really good idea of what the show could be, but not telling them what it has to be or what it should be. It really does keep the world very open. So the next step, which I wasn't expecting, is we started partnering with another entity, which was basically another LA-based production company.
That's right.
Can you talk a little bit about, and we won't really say about who they are, but we can talk a little bit about how they are different from Picture It and what their function is in this process.
Sure, it's Steven Spielberg, but anyway, no, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
Right.
That'd be cool though, right?
You heard it here first.
Call me. Yes. Okay. So because our company started 4 years ago and was a new entity, there was a huge learning curve for us, even though Lance already has a lot of experience in the industry. So one thing that Lance did not have a ton of access to is writers. And also a little bit of the process. So what we have been doing for the last couple of years is partnering with other development production companies, who then we bring the creative and they bring a combination of influence with writers, and a track record of having already produced television, taking it from development to current, so that when we come in the room with them, we have them as to heighten the package. Everything that we add to your project is to make it more sellable, make it more attractive to the buyer. So in this case, this particular team is also under a studio deal with CBS Studios, which is where we have a first look deal. And CBS Studios has basically been sending us to their other studio deal partners who don't have as much access to IP, but have a lot of great experience and are really smart producers. So they're able to connect the dots really well. And these guys in particular had already produced a lot of projects that made us go, oh, I bet they'd be fantastic for this show. But also, we showed them 6 or 7 different projects after we had a meeting with them. And they literally almost stormed our house with a SWAT team to make sure they got homeschooled. Yeah, I was like, don't cause a wreck on the 405 pulling over to watch this sizzle because you can't believe how good it is. And how amazing these guys are, but they were so passionate about homeschool that it was clear they were going to be the right partners. And then they have a lot more writer relationships and experience, so they're able to pull from their pool of writers to help us along, especially right now because of the problem we have with the Writers Guild versus the agencies. You can't call an agent and ask them to submit a number of writers because they don't have any writers right now. Or some of them are starting to. Paradigm does now.
Okay, interesting.
So yeah, people are starting to sign individual deals. Our agent just signed, so we're really glad for that because that puts them back in business. But yeah, so one of the things people don't realize is they forget that writers are king and television writers are king. So even I can remember doing agent calls with Matt Moscow, who is the producer for Doug Robinson, who used to run Happy Madison. He produced the Goldbergs, One of his producers, Matt Moscow, and I were on the phone calling agents, trying to get them to submit writers for a particular project, which, by the way, was an amazing project and already had some cool names attached. And they were sending us B-level writers, so it's like, we're calling on behalf of Doug Robinson. Do you know how we are? It really is a game of power and influence on a lot of levels. So when we bring in another producer, that's what we're doing. It's a combination of that. But they've brought in some really cool writers. So
yeah. And what's been fascinating is after we had, and to be clear, like our initial sizzle creation and conversation with Tara, from like our first meeting with Lance to the time that we got involved with this other production company was probably about almost 2 years.
Yep.
So just putting that in perspective about how the timeline worked. And there was a time when we first started, there was some traction and then we didn't hear anything about it. And, fortunately, John and I both have our own thing. So none of us were really butthurt about it too much. And then all of a sudden, it kind of steamrolled into this whole new thing with this new production company. So one of the things that they did was we got onto a phone call meeting or a Skype meeting or whatever, and we basically had another deep dive into who we are, the ideas of what the show could be, and not even what the show could be, more so just about mining the depths of our memories about our own experiences and other kind of characters and the attributes for that. So that was really fascinating, that process.
Yeah. A TV show takes so much work and so much content generation. What we want to show a writer is that there's an infinite number of episodes that can come from this world. And by infinite, I mean, hopefully at least 3 or 4 seasons. We all know the jump the shark moment. I'm pretty sure yours is going to be when you guys actually physically jump sharks. That's my dream. Is to have a show where sharks are jumped once again. Full circle. But, so that becomes the job of the consulting producer, is to be able to mine all of that information and to remain enthusiastic about it and open and available, because those writers really, they've heard everything and they want something fresh. So,
so talk a little bit about the next steps once we actually met with the writer and have these kind of meetings. I mean, with the production company we've been working with, we started, having these other conversations. So can you walk us through like our first meeting with the production company into starting to line up writers and all that kind of stuff, and maybe some of the stuff we know, but kind of include our audience into it?
Wait, so from the moment you met Picture It, or?
No, from this other company we're working with. So basically talking about some of the, how we got to the point where we were starting to meet with these writers now that we've been meeting with in the past couple of weeks.
Okay. I think I understand the question. It's one of those things where while you guys haven't heard a lot in the last 2 years or last year, because it took us probably about 6 months to get that sizzle tight, we've been showing it and showing it and showing it and soft pitching it, with meeting after meeting after meeting after meeting. And unless somebody is super hungry for it, we don't call you, we don't let you know, because they're not right for it. They have to be super hungry for it. They have to be a smart producer. There has to be a good reason for us to partner with them. And with our particular company that we partnered with on Homeschooled, once we knew they were on board and we agreed, because actually we had a couple of people all bite at the same time, and we were like, we're going to go with these guys. This is the right
really?
project.
That's
Yeah.
interesting. So
Yeah, see, we don't tell you everything.
No, this is great. No, I love it. So the idea is that you guys had been sending this out to other partners with CBS or just in your own network?
Both.
Okay.
I think Lance will send it to Rainn Wilson. That's one of his buddies. He'll go, what do you think? We can't work with Rainn right now because he's at Soul Pancake, and Soul Pancake, I think, has a deal elsewhere. Or, yeah, I think they have a deal, or they did anyway. It's always changing. That's the other thing that's fun, is deals come and go. But he'll send it to his buddy Adam Goldberg. You can't believe this group. Oh my God, they're so funny. You should call so-and-so. So it's a combination of our own partners, and then CBS Studios will send us a list of people that they want us to talk to. So we're sharing it, and you have to be careful. You can't share it with everybody at once. You have to share it with one, and this, we actually almost got in trouble with this because we do share it with more than one. Occasionally, it may get shared by more than one. It's sort of a gray area, because you don't send, if you're going to send a project to Jerry Bruckheimer, you don't send it anywhere else.
Right.
Some of these groups, they're a little more relaxed. They're like, yeah, we get it. We're not the only game in town. Jerry Bruckheimer's like, I'm the only game in town, and I know the SWAT team. So I'm big on the SWAT team today. We actually had submitted it to I think more than one company, and one company was like, what's going on with this project? And we're like, oh, they got partnered. Sorry. Let's call them quick and partner it. Because we really liked this one group. So our next step then is, it's just a series of meetings. We call up John and Raymond. We say, hey, we've got this great partner. We feel really passionate and strong about this. Obviously, if they'd met you and John and they'd been total dicks and you guys had been completely turned off, we would have walked away from that partnership. But that's not going to happen. We've already met them. We've already vetted them. They're great. They loved you guys. So it felt like a good match. Once they got to know John and Raymond's story, then they got a hand in crafting a different kind of pitch introduction. And every company is different. These guys wanted to write a one sheet, which is basically about a page of information with which they included pictures and links, the link to the sizzle. And then they sent that out to various writers and agents that they had relationships with. And then there's a period of time, again, which John and Raymond aren't really involved in because you don't need to be, in which Lance and myself and the other producers go back and forth over a long laundry list of writers. Now, John and Raymond actually have relationships with writers, so they submitted some as well. And we have to go through a process of calling the agents. Are you available? Are you open to development? We get a shorter list. We call the studio. We say, do you hate any of these people? Do you love any of these people? Then we go back and we submit to those writers and we say, hey, is this something you'd be interested in? So there's this negotiation period with a large group of writers, and a lot of it's theoretical because we don't always know every writer, and we're reading a lot of scripts going, yeah, they sound really angry. I don't know if they're right for this. And there's some mandates. Obviously, it was important for us to find an African-American writer for this particular project. So that was a priority. Gender was not as much. We were open to either. So once we identify 2 or 3 writers, we'll listen to a pitch from them.
It's funny because I didn't, so they sent us an email that was like, after we had our first meeting with this new production company, it was great and we felt really good. They sent us the one sheet and they said, here's a list of people who we are contacting, and showed their status, and it showed like a couple of their credits, which was great because you saw people from, some of the best shows on television, shows that I love, shows that I'm not a fan of, but I at least appreciate. Yeah. And then I started like Googling and I was like, okay, are these people Black? Like, and so I was really curious as to like how, because that wasn't a conversation that we had. And it certainly is not necessarily something that I personally feel like it needs to be one thing. I think it certainly helps, especially in the type of story that we're telling. But like, I don't know. I'm kind of open about that. So it's fascinating that you guys actually had that as a mandate.
That's a absolute. We can't take this story in with a white writer. Yeah. And that's really important in Hollywood right now. And it's really important to us because, representation and identity in the writer's room is at its, there's a huge spotlight on it right now. And it is attractive to see, it's exciting to be able to raise up these voices. So a network, that's a selling point. But yeah, it's, and also the sharing writers' names with you guys doesn't happen with every company. But you guys also bring to the table a lot of experience, writing experience. The other producers read John's script and loved it, saw Raymond's reel and were super impressed. So you guys are being allowed into the process a little bit more as creatives with a little bit more input because of your experience. And if that could happen with every creative, we would be thrilled with that, but that's not necessarily a typical situation. It really depends on the partnership. So I'm really glad that you guys are getting that opportunity, because that's not actually typical with our process.
Well, I will say though, and this is relevant to our audience, because we do have a lot of Georgia independent filmmakers like myself. And so when you go into this, like you said, you don't know what position where you're going to land personally in this process. And so it did actually benefit to have my own reel, John's theater script, these things that we had been doing on our own. It did benefit us to make sure that we potentially will still be a part of the conversation, as opposed to just some guy off the street who has like a random story that he's selling, It kind of helps us to be more involved in it in a certain way.
Demonstrating value in the television industry is vital. And they will see through a dilettante in a heartbeat. And we have to be careful as a company too, because when we bring people into the process, they're representing Picture It. And if they act like jackasses and they throw their weight around and make, really poor choices, that reflects really badly on us. And we've actually lost some relationships because of that, because of that being part of the process. So we have to be very careful. Everybody that's in television has had to work their ass off to get there. And if you want to be a part of that process, you're absolutely, every new voice is very valuable, but you have to understand what you bring to the table. If you have an idea, that's worth 10 cents. If you have worked hard to develop your voice and you can demonstrate that, whether it's with a legacy of playwriting or creating short films, a stand-up circuit, these are the kinds of things that demonstrate value. We have a comic book writer who's an illustrator and writer, and he's able to negotiate for more in his contract because he can demonstrate value. So just as you approach the process, remember that what are you really bringing to the table? Writing a script is incredibly challenging. A good script is so hard to make, and it is a very collaborative process. So if what you want to be as a writer, be aware that just knocking out a pilot script, having never written TV before, is a great exercise, but it's not necessarily a calling card. And just to kind of have I don't want to say humility because that sounds like such a gross word, but respect for this, you don't want your heart surgeon to come in and be like, I watched a YouTube video, because it's an incredibly challenging skill set. And I'm very humbled as I watch the process and watch my friends go through the process, how much work it is. So you guys have already put in a lot of the work is what I'm saying, which is why you are where you are.
Well, and our audience has too, which is great. So as much as we are, giving some reality of it, like everyone should still feel encouraged that what we have done has not been for nothing.
Yes. The point is I see a ton of faces here that have worked their butts off, and I know what they're capable of. So know your value is important, but it works both ways. Know that you do have value and look for ways to be able to demonstrate that.
Right. One of the interesting things, and, as just going down the line of chronology of where we are now, we had basically several meetings with these amazing writers, and part of it is the fact that we do have an opportunity because we are all telecommunicating all the time right now. I'm not sure how it would have worked if we weren't all in quarantine right now, or if we would have even had. Certainly, the writers wouldn't have had as much time to have these meetings, probably.
I don't, I don't really know, because it's been a little different with every single process. And we have used video meetings. Creatives are often on the phone meeting with writers and whatnot. So there is some contact, but yeah, I think the quarantine has definitely brought up some really unique opportunities.
Yeah. So, and another thing is talking about like the writer's credits. There were some people on there that we were getting bites from and other people we didn't. And I was making judgments based on their credits.
Mhm.
But like all of us as creatives, just because you're in a job doesn't necessarily mean that is the end all be all or where you want to be in your career. So there were moments when we were on a conversation and people were referencing the show they were on, and they were like, yeah, that's not really exactly what I'm trying to do right now. This is really what I'm trying to do. And which was kind of nice and refreshing too, to see that obviously writers are more than the show they're currently on.
Oh yeah. Yeah, the credits are designated by the WGA and negotiated by an agent. So somebody that has a really high level credit may have had a really powerful agent and aren't quite as skilled. There's writers that have a really strong ability to run a room. And there's writers who have really great dialogue skills and really great structure skills. So everybody's kind of bringing something different to the table. But the credits are a really important thing for when we go to the network, because show running in particular is such a unique skill. It goes so far beyond, can I write a good story? So a lot of times some of the lower level writers that we're bringing to you because they have a really powerful, unique, up and coming voice. And it's quite possible that if we do decide to go with them, that we will then be asked by the studio to identify a showrunner that can mentor them and supervise them. We actually are going through that process with another project right now, where we have identified a really great writer. It's for a project that is about a half Japanese family or siblings. So the young woman who's writing it is half Asian. She's half Korean, but she's got enough to sell it in the room. That being said, she's a young writer. So we're also speaking to a high level showrunner that she's worked with that's really excited to supervise her and mentor her through this process, because she doesn't have enough experience to run a room, but she has a really great voice, and she's got that ethnic identity that's in particular is important for us to raise up in this project. So yeah, there's all kinds of ways in which we work this so that the project is something that is palatable to a network like ABC or CBS or Showtime or Netflix that's going to be putting a lot of money into it.
So we have about 5 minutes left, but I want to go further down. So say if a show, take it out of our conversation and what we're doing specifically, say if another show that you're developing does go to the next level where they actually decide on a writer and they start to have this relationship. Now we have two production companies,
That's
the
right.
person with the initial idea, and we've attached a writer to this. What are the next steps to becoming a television show?
Next steps are, for us in particular, once we've got the writer, we'll work together to create a pitch that we'll take to CBS Studio. CBS Studio is affiliated with CBS Network, but they are a separate entity. They are a production studio. That's who's given us a little fee to stay in business and give them first look at our project.
So just to be clear, the actual pitch, are we talking about like a pilot script, or are we talking about
A verbal pitch?
A verbal
Probably
pitch.
be about 20 minutes long.
Okay.
Usually around there, especially if it's going to be a half an hour, it shouldn't be too long of a pitch. We may show them the sizzle in that pitch. We just did a pitch on Zoom and succeeded in getting CBS Studios to sign on. Once CBS Studios signs on, they will make a deal with the Carr brothers, if that's who our creative is. They'll make a deal with the writer. They'll make a separate deal with the producers, and by the way, the producers that we're teaming up with, we're splitting that chunk of the pie. We've agreed to partner. So we're not getting a bunch more money. We're actually splitting our money in half in order to hedge our bets that we can make this project get to TV.
Interesting.
If studio says yes, great. They'll give us a little more feedback on the pitch. We'll massage it a little bit, and then we'll take it to network, to the buyer. In your case, it depends on the writer whether or not we try to go to broadcast. We usually do separate pitches for broadcast networks versus streaming cable. But other than that, we'll schedule pitches to go to the networks. We take a project to the network. Again, it's a verbal pitch. It will be hopefully in the room with people and human beings listening to each other and living in the space and breathing each other's gross air. And then we wait and see. Generally, we know within a week. You sometimes, very rarely, but once in a while, they'll buy it in the room, which means sold this project. If we are with CBS Studios and CBS Network or CW Network or any of their other affiliated, CBS All Access says we want it, we stop going anywhere else, they get it. But otherwise, there could be a bidding war where more than one network wants it. We decide which network we want to go with. We sign the contracts. The writer goes off to the races. They have a series of deadlines from outline to story area, outline, script, second draft, third draft. They get paid for that. Nobody else gets paid. No creatives get paid. No Carr brothers get paid. No Picture It gets paid. No Jerry Bruckheimer gets paid. Just the writer and his agent. He gets paid however many fancy dollars they get paid to write the pilot. Then the network says, we love it. We're going to pilot. Picture It has never heard those words yet. We're close. We're very, very close, but we haven't heard them yet. We've sold 7 projects. We've gone through entire scripts on almost all of them. But at some point, the network, usually about 10% of the shows that get sold end up going to pilot. So the rest, they pull the plug. They say, thanks, no thanks. If there's a penalty, the studio gets some money for investing and then getting kicked to the curb. But otherwise, that's it for the project. It goes into turnaround. We may try to sell it elsewhere. Quite often, it just goes to bed. But if not, it goes to pilot, unless you have a straight to series order, which we do for a project. Fingers crossed, we're close. If it goes to pilot, everybody gets paid. Very little. If it goes to series, everybody gets paid a little bit more. And then it's, season 1, season 2. So that's kind of the process for traditional television. If you're somewhere like Netflix, that schedule can go out the window. They may shoot the whole series and then it may sit in the can for a year. They have their own system. Broadcast is a little bit more structured. Cable streaming is a little bit more loosey-goosey.
That's really, really fascinating. So, I mean, obviously this whole process is years in the making.
Years.
With many, many hurdles and hoops and booby traps and straight up trapdoors to go forward.
Lots of broken hearts, but also lots of really exciting and fun educational experiences.
Yeah. So I'm eternally grateful, if nothing else, for the educational process. That's at the end of the day what I am experiencing right now. And every time I get on the phone with y'all, I feel more and more educated, and completely happy that I'm not the one who is in the room making those deals. Because ultimately, like, at the end of the day, that's something that we've all done. Like, Molly's made a pilot, I've made pilots. Like, we have people in here, Jose made a pilot, that thinking, and not to say that can't be done or that shouldn't be done. There are different ways to get things on the air, but this is a traditional way, as you say.
Exactly. Yes. If you want to pay for your own pilot, there are so many benefits to that and so many good reasons to do that. One of those reasons is not because Picture It can help you.
Exactly. Yeah. Oh my gosh. Thank you so much, Tara Oates.
My
You were the best.
pleasure.
We're literally the best.
It was, I'm so happy to see so many faces that I know very well and some that I know a little bit and hope to get to see again soon.
So
Guys.
we will be releasing this to those who have participated in a different kind of way. So y'all who feel like you know somebody who could benefit from this conversation, please let us know. If you are interested in kind of getting your idea to Picture It, they still are accepting pitches, or not pitches, but ideas and different things of that nature. Maybe a lot of people won't do it now that they've learned how freaking hard it is.
It's challenging, but we have a website, pictureitproductions.com, where you can submit your idea. I've made it a much more simplified process. If it's not an idea we can use right now, you won't have a response back, but it may be worth it just to throw that out there into the ether and kind of get your own creative juices rolling, because you never know. Our mandates are constantly changing. Last year, we couldn't get anybody to talk about a homeschooled Christian clown, but now everybody hungry for it. I don't know why.
And that's funny because we were developing this homeschooled thing. It started catching fire again before the quarantine.
Before
people were starting to homeschool. Yeah. Which is crazy. So we were already in the zeitgeist.
Yeah. We were tapping into something there. As you guys have always been way ahead, or maybe way behind. I'm not sure.
I guess you'll have to tune in to see.
Tune in.
Yes, Molly, you want to remind some folks about upcoming things with FIG?
Yeah, absolutely. So our logline contest for June has launched. We last night announced our winners for the May, which was a theme of isolation. Our June theme is horror. So you can submit any horror ideas that you have on our website. The deadline for that is June 14th. We have a short film grant applications currently open you can get $5,000 to make a short film. The deadline for that is July 1st. And be sure and visit our website or join our Facebook community so that you can be notified of upcoming things that we're going to be rolling out soon.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Tara Oates and Picture It.
Pleasure.
Y'all are the best.
Keep creating, Atlanta. People are taking notice.
Yes. Hell yeah. All right. Good night, everybody.
Bye.